What is up, my beautiful gemstones? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, thanks for checking us out. My name is GemmaJade, but today we are going to be discussing amazing and fascinating stories of reincarnation. Reincarnation is a subject I've talked about and discussed broadly here on this channel many times, but I've never actually covered it in a full pre-recorded video yet. I thought, what better time than the present to do so, as I came across randomly a few stories of people who either actually remember their past lives or who for some reason, for one reason or another at one point in time, begin to remember them. I absolutely believe in reincarnation because of my abilities and things I've learned and experienced from the spiritual realm throughout my entire life. Things I try so hard most of the time to pass along to all of you, whether any of you actually listen or not. Many people believe that reincarnation, or at the very least the idea of it, has been with our humanity since arguably our collective understanding of ourselves, more specifically of our own existence. I know in my generation alone, there's been much legitimate debate about the matter of past lives and our souls having lived lives other than the ones we're currently living in. It doesn't matter if you believe that time is linear like most people on this planet do today, or if you understand that everything is happening in the here and now, past, present, and future, all at the same time. Most religions have issues with the idea of past lives, but to me that doesn't make sense, because if we were ever really able to prove through science and beyond the shadow of a doubt that reincarnation is real, then it just shows that we really are immortal beings. Anyway, as always, let me know what you all think in the comments below, but be respectful, guys. Before we get started, I would like to remind you all that past lives don't always take place here on Earth, and in fact, it could happen anywhere, in any dimension, at any time, across the universe, and even beyond. It's a massive concept with tons of nuance, so please just keep an open mind if you choose to stay and hear me out, and to hear the stories of the people who've experienced some type of memory of another life. Let's jump right in. One of the most well-known and arguably one of the most famous cases of reincarnation is that of a man named James Leininger. James said he could remember his life as a World War II fighter pilot. James's family backed him up and said when he was as young as 3 years old, he had an extremely intense interest in World War II aviation. He had an intricate knowledge of how each individual aircraft worked and functioned, and this went well beyond a normal and average 3-year-old boy's interest in and knowledge of these things. Keep in mind, World War II was fought at least a half of a century before James was even born, and he'd never been exposed to even the most basic information about any of it, what it was, or anything like that. James not only could draw very detailed pictures of a United States fighter plane's drop tank, but he could also explain and break the plane down and explain everything about it in a way that only a very experienced veteran pilot could. With the good always comes at least a little bit of the bad, and alongside all of these amazing things James was able to do from a very young age, he also suffered extreme and terrible nightmares and night terrors. His family didn't know what to do, and so they asked him to draw a picture of what was happening in the nightmares. And when he did, James drew a plane in flames that was seemingly hurling towards the ground, ready to crash on impact. His family obviously didn't know what to do, but eventually they did ask him about what the nightmares and pictures of them meant, and James explained to them that he was the pilot of the plane that was in flames and crashing down. He didn't say this with any uncertainty and was as confident of it as he was his own name at that time. He also said that, quote, the Japanese, end quote, had shot down his plane and that he had an accident as a result of that. He was very matter-of-fact when he spoke about all of this and went on to explain that he had a boat named the HMAS Natoma. His parents decided to research more into what their 3-year-old was telling them, and they found that there was a United States Navy boat that existed and had that same name during World War II, and that it had served against the Japanese. His parents didn't let it go and kept trying to get more information out of James about what was happening with him, and I'm not sure at this time they were really understanding that this had everything to do with past lives. During one of those subsequent investigations, James was shown a photo of the crew members of the HMAS Natoma, and he immediately started naming each and every one of them and pointing the person out as he did so. He also identified himself as U.S. Navy pilot James Houston. Once again, research confirmed that James Houston was a Navy pilot and had been piloting the Natoma when he lost his life during an engagement with the enemy. There were a couple of crew members that survived and who were still alive when James was going through all of this, so his parents reached out to some of those crew members, and the descriptions little James gave of James Houston's death and as he was in life were entirely accurate and exactly right according to those crew members who knew James Houston. I'm not covering anyone's full story here in complete detail in this video, as it's an overview of many cases, but going forward I do have a few cases I want to discuss in detail and at length, and I'll give them their own video. What do you all think about this case? How else would this little boy, only 3 years old, know all of this? I truly and wholeheartedly believe this little boy came back with full recall of his most recent past life. That's incredibly rare and uncommon, and I wonder what James is doing now. Let's move on. Our next case is kind of disturbing but very thought-provoking, and it's the case of 5-year-old Luke Ruhlman. Luke's mother, Erica, would often listen to her son play, and a lot of the time she would hear him referring to someone named Pam. Eventually, after some time, she got curious and asked her son who Pam was. His response was shocking. Luke explained to Erica that he, quote, was Pam, but then I died and went up to heaven, but was pushed back down, end quote. He then stated, quote, when I woke up I was a baby and you named me Luke, end quote. So basically, Luke was explaining to his mother about his most recent past life where he was a woman named Pam and had somehow died and gone to heaven. Erica was startled, but then she started to think back on all the times, and there were many, when Luke would tell her and anyone else who would listen that he, quote, used to be a girl, end quote. He would state it very matter-of-factly and with such nonchalance that Erica really never thought much of it and thought maybe he was playing some kind of game or that he just had a very wild and vivid imagination. He also once told her that he, quote, used to wear those same earrings, end quote, as she did, but that he had black hair when he was Pam. Erica, try as she may, could not just let all of this go, even though she was shocked to say the least, and she pressed her son for more information. She asked him things like where Pam was from and how she died. Luke said that when he was Pam, he lived in Chicago and that he/she, quote, took the train a lot, end quote. He told her that Pam had to jump out of a window because of a fire and that she died. Erica was unnerved, but immediately began to research what Luke had just told her. She found that in March of 1993, at the Paxton Hotel in Chicago, a fire ripped through the building and killed 19 people. One of the people who perished was named Pam Robinson, and she died after the smoke and flames forced her to jump out of the window to her death. We have another case of fascinating reincarnation that comes from Scotland, and it happened in 2009. 2-year-old Cameron Macaulay one day suddenly started telling everyone in his family about another life where he lived in a white house on the island of Barra. Cameron didn't stop there and offered some more details that made it impossible for his parents to continue to ignore. He claimed to have been the son of a man named Shane Robertson and that he'd owned a black and white dog. He said as well that he was killed because he'd been, quote, knocked down by a motorist, end quote. His parents didn't worry too much about any of this except for one thing. Cameron would sometimes be in absolute and total anguish, which made his parents very upset as well, of course, as he would cry and carry on yelling, I miss my other mom. Cameron's family thought about taking a trip to Ireland and trying to prove or disprove what he was saying. They thought it would be a good idea, and so that's what they did. Cameron was immediately able to lead everyone to a white house on the beachfront on the island of Barra. The Robinson family did in fact live in the home, and once invited inside, Cameron knew his way around the house immediately as though he'd lived there his entire life. The black and white dog he'd often talked about was still alive and well right there in the house. Every detail Cameron had given about his life in Barra was correct except one, and that was who his alleged father had been in the past life. Jim Tucker is a lead researcher into these types of reincarnation cases, and he investigated this case along with so many other cases. Jim said about the one incorrect detail with the father's name was that it was simply a case, or more than likely so, of Cameron forgetting more of the smaller details as he got older. He said it happens with many kids who come into this life remembering one from the past. The older they get, the more they forget, and from my experience, that's the same with being able to connect to the other side. We tend to grow out of our abilities. Whether we do that by society kind of pushing us away. There's no monster in your closet. There's nothing under your bed. There's no such thing as ghosts. Most of us do anyway, right? Arguably, one of the strangest cases of reincarnation comes from England and happened in the 1950s. Now, this case in particular is the reason that I decided to go about this video. This case fascinates me to no end. I just find it so amazing and intriguing, as I find all the cases. But this one is like, wow, it pinpoints so many different things, like birthmarks, right? I've talked about how birthmarks are sometimes injuries from past lives or ways of death if you got shot or killed with an arrow. Again, it's massive and so nuanced, but this case in particular is the reason I chose to do this video. On May 5th, 1957, John and Florence Pollock were driving with their two daughters, 11-year-old Joanna and 6-year-old Jacqueline, through their hometown of Hexham and ended up getting into a horrific car accident. Both of the children died in the accident, and both John and Florence were shattered and devastated by the loss of their only two children. On October 4th, 1958, Florence gave birth again, and again, she had twin girls. The couple named the new babies Jillian and Jennifer. A few weeks after the babies were born, John and Florence made a frightening but somewhat comforting discovery about their twin girls. Jennifer had a very pronounced birthmark on her forehead and waist, and these were located in the exact same spots where their daughter Jacqueline also had the same birthmarks on her body. The couple tried not to read too much into it, and they were determined to move on with their lives. They moved to the north of England to try and get a fresh start with their new twin daughters. As the years progressed, though, things would happen that would be harder and harder to ignore for these parents. The twins would ask them for toys that not only had they never owned, but also that belonged to their deceased twin sisters. Several years later, the family decided to move back to Hexham, and that's when it became even more strange and harder to ignore. Once again, the girls had been infants the last time they'd been in Hexham, and there was no way they could have had any memories of it. However, the two twins knew where everything was in the town as if they'd lived there and known their whole lives. Whenever a car would approach their vehicle, the twins Jillian and Jennifer would be terrified and inconsolable, as though they were fearful, but for no good reason. It was these things and so many more that caused Florence and John to understand that their twins were the reincarnated souls of their deceased twin daughters, Jacqueline and Joanna. Before we move on, I just want to let you guys know I am in the midst of a severe cold. I think if you watch my shorts and my TikToks, you guys will know that. I'm just letting you know that's why my voice sounds the way it does. It isn't just the most recent past life that some people come here and are born recalling. In fact, there have been several cases of people who recall their past lives from centuries and decades before they were born in the here and now, whenever that might be for them at that time. A woman named Dorothy Eady said she was once the unknown lover of one of the most powerful pharaohs in ancient Egypt. Of course, in the beginning, most people thought she was just an eccentric and playing around, but then she began revealing information about archaeological sites that had never even been released to the public, and she would have had absolutely no way of knowing anything she'd been revealing to anyone. In some cases, these sites hadn't even been discovered yet, and that's when people began to take her claims much more seriously. Dorothy was born in London in 1904, and her childhood was perfectly normal and usual until, when she was 3 years old, she had a horrible accident. She sustained a severe head injury and was declared legally dead for several minutes. She underwent a seemingly miraculous recovery, and at first she appeared to be unaffected by the tragedy completely. However, as the years wore on, her parents began to notice a distinct change in her personality and behavior, not in the least being her constant and incessant demands to, quote, return home to Egypt, end quote. Young Dorothy began to speak in great detail about life in ancient Egypt and insisted she'd once lived there. She said she was a priestess named Bentrashit, and that she lived in the temple of the pharaoh Seti I. In addition to all of this revealed information, her parents noticed that suddenly her personality was becoming more and more volatile. She'd have random moments of rage erupting in seemingly random screams and shouts, and when she did this, which made it worse, she would only speak in a language she'd never learned and that her parents didn't know what it was. Once she became a teenager, Dorothy became exceedingly detached from her life in London and dreams and talks about her life in Egypt all the time. She would refer to it as her real life and longingly recall it to anyone who was willing to listen. By the time she was 28 years old, Dorothy was married to a man named Iman Abdel Maguid, and she was finally able to return to Egypt. Once she was there, all of the memories of her past life came flooding back to her, and not only that, but she was being guided by a spirit named Hora. Hora offered her guidance and, more importantly, gave her even more information about her past life there. Dorothy learned that her father had been a soldier in the Egyptian army who, following the death of her mother, had been a fruit seller. He turned her over to the priestesses in the temple of the pharaoh Seti I. She referred to the pharaoh as, quote, the living god, end quote. She eventually met him and fell deeply and truly in love with him, and they'd even conceived a child together. However, the high priest at the time insisted that this love child would, quote, represent a great offense to the goddess Isis and cause many problems for the pharaoh, end quote. Ultimately, due to being unable to be with the pharaoh and with her child being basically forbidden to even exist, Bent Rashid took her own life. She'd often suggested, as Dorothy, that she'd been encouraged to do so. So Dorothy was saying, you know, I did take my own life, but I was encouraged by people to take my own life. She never elaborated on that part of it, but that's basically what she was saying. Alongside these claims, which many believe to be unbelievable and very outlandish, Dorothy was able to provide archaeologists at sites in ancient Egypt at that time with information that had never been publicly released, and when she started helping in this way and doing those things, that's when people started taking her claims much more seriously. It was when she moved to Abydos, which is around 7 miles west of the Nile River in Egypt, that some of her most thought-provoking revelations came to light. She started talking about secret chambers and long-buried gardens that had never been discovered. One of the things that caught the attention of the public the most about Dorothy was when she would be seen pressing on certain stone walls of the temple, but she would be seen doing it in a particular and very meticulous order. When asked what she was doing and why, she would explain that she was looking for hidden chambers or, quote, hidden doors and portals to other places, end quote. This was proof to many who believed in Dorothy and in her past life recall that there are other places, realms, and dimensions, there are other worlds that exist beyond and besides our own, and that there's more than likely much more to those who were considered Egyptian gods than them just having been mortal men, right? Like maybe they really were gods or extraterrestrials. It depends on what you believe, though, of course. GemmaJadeYT isn't the only one to have been born with or come to knowledge in our modern world who believe they recall ancient past lives. Another example is James Arthur Flowerdew, who is also from the UK. From the time he was just a very young boy, James would have an intense and very lucid dreams of being in a great city completely surrounded by a desert. While in this city, he would also see a large temple carved into a rock face. One day, as an adult, when he was randomly watching a show on the BBC about the ancient city of Petra in Jordan, much to his amazement, the pictures on the screen of this city were exactly the ones he'd been dreaming about for his entire life. He'd been dreaming of a real place after all. He knew immediately somehow that those dreams meant something more than what dreams normally do, and he also knew they meant something very profound, and he immediately went to the newspapers with his claims. Not too long after he did that, some of the producers of that documentary on the ancient city of Petra contacted him and asked if he would like to go public with his claims, as they were willing to make a documentary about what he was saying he'd been dreaming about and how he connected it all to that ancient city. James immediately agreed to do the documentary, and he went along with a film crew to the city of Petra. A, quote, intense feeling of being home, end quote, overwhelmed him the moment he entered the city, and he was just completely and totally in awe of it. It immediately became clear to everyone there with him, and perhaps more so to James himself, that he wasn't lying and was in fact somehow connected to this city. He was completely aware of the layout of the city and knew intricate details about it that he would have had no way at all of knowing had he not been there before. Even someone who had traveled there once or twice would not have known these particular and specific things. Much like the aforementioned GemmaJadeYT, James talked about the locations of sites that hadn't even been discovered yet at that time, and those claims would later prove to be 100% accurate. James said he hadn't lived there in another life decades ago, but in a past life centuries earlier, and the most startling realization would occur to him when he neared a guard station one day while out perusing the city some more. As soon as James saw this guard station, he became flustered and told everyone with him that he'd been killed right at that site, thereby ending that incarnation when he was stabbed with a spear by some unknown person. The people who witnessed the events in person who were there with him, as well as many of the people who ended up seeing the documentary about James and Petra, believed him wholeheartedly and thought that there was just no way he could have been making it all up as he went along. Our last case is a short one, but not because I don't have dozens upon dozens more of cases of people who remember previous incarnations they've lived, but because I don't want these videos going on for too long anymore. Rest assured, this will be a subject in which I do many videos in the near future about it. In the book, died 1513, born 1929, the autobiography of A.J. Stewart, a woman named Ada Kay wrote about her belief that she had lived before. Actually, she was very specific and said she was fully aware she'd lived before as the Stuart king, King James IV of Scotland. He was killed in the Battle of Flodden in Northumberland in 1513, and he was only 40 years old at the time of his death. Ada said that since she was a little girl, she'd had strange and very intense memories of standing in a muddy field before being killed by soldiers armed with swords. As a young child, she would also question everyone as to why she wasn't a prince, why she didn't live in a castle, and why her last name wasn't Stuart. At that time, she was far too young to have ever learned or otherwise had any knowledge about any of the things she was asking. In the 1960s, she visited Flodden, and that's when the full recollection of her past life there came back to her. I would love to get more in depth on this one, but in the interest of saving time, I'm going to end it there. But I will be back with part 2 and probably with many more parts to this very fascinating subject in the near future, as I previously said. Let me know what you all think in the comments below, please. But remember that while everyone is, of course, entitled to your own thoughts, ideas, and opinions, it's not okay to be rude or nasty or to really argue in the comments about anything. Be respectful, not just to others, but to yourselves as well. That's all I have for you today, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the content. If you enjoyed hanging out with me despite my nasally voice and sick face, I really do appreciate you guys and all of the support you give me, my members, my patrons, my gemstones in general, right? I really, really do have so much love for y'all. Subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure your notification bell is on and click to all so you get notified of everything I do, whether it's shorts, my TikToks I upload to here, the pre-recorded videos, the live streams, and anything and everything in between. Please check out the description box for some important links, ways to donate to the channel, PayPal, Cash App, my Amazon wish list gift link. Donations are basically how I get paid right now, so if you want to make a donation, please feel free to do that. That information, as I said, is in the description box, along with most of the links for my 14 books available on Amazon, Kindle, paperback, and Audible. If you can't find what you're looking for, if you just want to make it easy on yourself, you can go to Amazon and type in Gemma Jade Books, and there you will find my entire collection. Join me on my other social medias. I do Snapchat and X a little bit, but mainly you'll find me on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, with YouTube and TikTok being the main socials that I have right now. It's either Gemma Jade or GemmaJadeYT. I'm not that hard to find. Y'all know my face. If you'd like autographed copies of any of my books, if you'd like more information on services I offer, products that I sell, for any and all professional correspondence, please email me at GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com. If you are emailing about an autographed copy of the book, please try to do so before you make the purchase. Also, if you've ordered any of my books, if you've read any of my books, I can barely speak, I'm so sick, please go to Amazon and give a 5-star rating and review it. Just a few words to keep the trolls from really bringing my star point system down and getting my book pushed out there. Be kind to each other, guys. It doesn't cost anything. Be kind to yourselves and never accept anything less than others being kind to you. If nobody told you today, you are amazing. You got this. Put the intensive action behind your manifestations, and there's nothing that you can't do. I believe in you. I got your back. Always go in grace, smile at a stranger, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.